penis was missing again. This happens all the time, it's detachable. This comes in handy a lot of the time. I can leave it home when I think it's going to get me in trouble, or I can rent it out when I don't need it. But now and then I go to a party, get drunk, and the next morning I can't, for the life of me, remember what I did with it. First I looked around my apartment and I couldn't find it, so I called up the place where the party was. They hadn't seen it either. I asked them to check the medicine cabinet, cause for some reason I leave it there sometimes, but not this time. So I told them if it pops up to let me know. I called a few people who were at the party, but they were no help either. I was starting to get desperate. I really don't like being without my penis for too long. It makes me feel like less of a man, and I really hate having to sit down every time I take a leak. After a few hours of searching the house and calling everyone I could think of, I was starting to get very depressed, so I went to the Kiev and ate breakfast. Then as I walked down 2nd Avenue towards St. Mark's Place, where all those people sell used books and other junk on the street, I saw my penis lying on a blanket next to a broken toaster oven. Some guy was selling it. I had to buy it off him. He wanted $22, but I talked him down to 17. I took it home, washed it off, and put it back on. I was happy again, complete. People sometimes tell me I should get it permanently attached, but I don't know. Even though sometimes it's a pain in the ass, I like having a detachable penis.
All right. Hey, listeners, welcome back to T-Boys Flag. This is episode 4, and I have a very interesting guest today. Who are you? What are your name, pronouns, and what are we discussing today?
So my name is Tom Sosnik. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a trans man, and I'm here to talk with you about trans nudism, which is close to my heart.
Hell yeah. I love trans nudism in like a weird personal way, but I've never discussed it with anyone, and I'm really excited to. How did you start your trans nudist journey? What is trans nudism, and what really made you be like, oh yeah, this is really I'm gonna try this out? Because I don't think it's a obvious thing.
No, I think that trans people are often told to not directly, but the messaging is to kind of decentralize your body and your identity. Because there's this denial of my sex and my gender identity don't match up, and so my way of coping with that is I'm just gonna pretend this body is something that it isn't, or I don't know, we just get trapped in the dysphoria loop. So trans nudism is kind of this this free thinking place. I mean, nudism to me is where is this appropriate? Because I love the idea behind it, but I think that when cis people are nudist,
it's swingerism, being swingers almost. It's on premise this is okay. In praxis by cis people, especially cis het people, not vibing.
No, very much not. So my journey was like, I think I kind of, it was during quarantine that I finally started to live alone. I'd never really like occupied a space alone before. And I had no idea how to relate to my body or how to be comfortable in my body by myself, which is ridiculous. I was just like, I've spent almost a year at home now alone. And this is still something that I haven't interrogated in 20 years of my life. So I made a pact with myself that I would, every day when I showered, when I got home, I would not put on clothes until I left my house the next day. And then I just started to like really feel the impacts of that in terms of how I was relating to my body.
Yeah, I think, at least for me, I am not necessarily in the full nudist, like without underwear, just because I don't want to clean that. Like my worry is always like, oh, I don't want to get like any like pussy juice on my pillows. Like I really don't want to deal with that, because I'll wake up and I'll be like, oh no. But I had a really weird situation of like, I've never lived alone, but I grew up as an only child, and I would just sit in my room in my underwear, even pre-top surgery. I would just sit there in my panties or my like boxers or my briefs and just do whatever. I just live my life. Like I would be like on Zoom call. I would be like not on Zoom calls. Well, no, yeah, I was on Zoom calls. Just my like camera off, or I'd have a shirt on and no pants. Or on Discord calls, or on like just editing stuff on Photoshop, or just playing games. And it was really like, I never really thought about it until like we met and you started talking about it. I'm like, oh my God, wait, yeah. I think like you mentioned, it's like we're so conditioned as trans people to like think solely in dysphoria. I think trans nudism is like an act of like gender euphoria in that way, of like self-indulgence.
Totally, right? Because there's this messaging that like your body is something that shouldn't be seen and shouldn't be touched and shouldn't be sexualized. It can't be done like. And I think that this is kind of a reassertion of humanity in a sense, right? Like, oh, actually, my body looks so much like all of my roommates' bodies. And like, instead of, because I think like there's this natural thing that I had for so long. It was like, I wouldn't let anybody see me naked. I was in relationships and they had never seen me naked. And like, I was in a relationship with someone, and the first time that she saw me naked was in a film that I made. And I showed. And I was like, as I was playing it, this was running through my head. I was like, this is fucking crazy. Like, I've let this get so far, this like internalized messaging about my body being wrong or being undesirable, I think, fundamentally. And so I think this is kind of, it's just a way to combat that through self-acceptance, but not in any like, it's not in any grand like love your body type way. It's just like, oh, this is the vessel that carries me. Why don't I get to know this vessel instead of trying to think about like how I can make this one assimilate into something that it never will,
Exactly. I think like especially like with when you're talking about like the sexualization, which it's so interesting because there's like a simultaneous like bi cis people like want to desexualize but then also fetishize at the same time. And I think like trans nudism as like a self aspect is like such a reclamation of both sides, where it's like, no outside purveyor has any stake on my body because it's my body. And I think like it's so crazy how like nudity in like trans relationships, or even like being trans and with someone, is so weird, because even if you feel so comfortable in your body, like you feel like, oh, I'm fine, you still have like this inkling fear, and it's almost like, I think like a lot of people would feel it with like being nude in front of people, but it's like something different than like, oh, I just have like what is it, like hips, big hips as a guy. It's just like, it's nothing like that. It's like
it's a paradigm shift. Oh my god, it's a paradigm shift, and it sucks because it's like you have to acknowledge that like your body's really different. You know, like I that's something that I've really been thinking about. It's like, actually, like it does look very similar to my roommates who are both girls, but also like if you put our bodies next to each other, it would be kind of shocking. Like, not shocking in any way that's like bad, but just like it's not something that you see. And I feel like that's also, people try to deny that, you know? It's like what are you talking about? Like, we talk about trans people's genitalia and like, you know, like we know, but it's actually like that story that you were telling me of like the waxer who was talking about how weird trans pussies are. And like, it doesn't occur to anyone that there are men who walk around with pussies. I think that it doesn't, genuinely is something that like really shocks people.
Yeah, it's just like that, like I don't have a penis in my pants. It's just like, because on like when you're outside and you're like, especially when you're trans mask and you're just living your life outside and you pass, well, no one thinks about it. And that's kind of like, Tom and I, we had a conversation about, I was talking about how like I have this like kind of weird, I guess, trans queer theory of basically the difference between the treatment of trans women and trans men in society is like kind of the difference between the definitions of abuse and neglect. Of like with trans femmes, it's like for visibility that leads to violence, and there's like a hyperspectacle to their beings, which is what's causing so much issues with them existing in a cis heteronormative society. And then on the converse side, there is a on like the part of like trans men and trans masculine people, it's this what is the word? It's this neglect that like we aren't recognized at all. Like we're just kind of invisible to a degree. Like we're there, but we're so stealth about sometimes. Like some people, if they meet me, they don't know I'm trans, even though it's not that I'm hiding it in any way. It's like I have this fucking radio show. Like I like talking about being trans, but it's not something that's like assumed or anything. I guess that's like a good thing, but it's like, how is that good? Like how it's nothing. And
I have, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like the story I was telling about was on Twitter. There was this screenshot from an esthetician's Instagram story, and she's basically like being like, "Oh my god, trans! I'll do waxing for everybody, but trans pussies are ugly." And a lot of people, even a lot of trans femmes, were like, "Oh, this is about like trans women in a trans woman's pussy," and taking it more that direction. But the thing is, and there were like a lot of trans femmes are confused because they're like, trans femme pussies are fine, and it's like, yeah, they look like perfect, but it's like this, they forget that like, oh, there's trans people that are men that have pussies, and maybe they kind of look a little fucked up because testosterone, but it's like to cis people,
don't know that.
They don't know that. Yeah,
you know. They don't know how hormones change people's bodies. And to be fair, like I don't really know how estrogen works when you take it.
Oh no, I don't know anything about like estrogen or like any trans femme stuff. And I think it's like it goes the same. It goes both ways.
Yeah.
Like we have no reason to know this.
Yeah, but I mean, back to the real like point of what you're saying. It's like it's this spectacle that we have been. I don't know, trans men in relation to like the trans spectacle, and like in terms of fetishization as well. Like I think that it's a really different conversation because like it's not that people don't have trans man fetishes. Sure, there are people who have fetishes for everything, And there is a small percentage of people who have like fetishes for trans guys, but that's like really not the primary like way that trans people are fetishized. I think there's a much bigger conversation to be had about like the shit that goes on between like men, supposedly straight men, and like doing really fucked up shit to trans women, and like that being really, you know, that being a really sensitive area of like, but yeah, so I can't speak on that, but I think that even in my experience, you know, I played an experimental film for my class about disclosing that you're trans in a sexual context of like, the way I was telling it was like through the progression of me getting undressed. And it's all very distorted. It's not like discernible. It's discernible that I don't have a dick. And I'm explicitly saying that I'm trans. And still after this class, like people in my class don't understand. Like I've heard a story about someone being like, oh, like Tom is trans? Tom can't be trans. Like he has a beard. And this is like after watching my film and then watching me draw like a nude self-portrait. And I'm not up there drawing like vaginas in detail, but like very clearly suggesting that I don't have a dick and that I'm trans. and someone was like, so Tom is gonna be a girl? It's truly like something that people can't, it's baffling to them. And the amount of questions that I've been asked. It's
oh my God, the questions.
Ugh.
It's ridiculous in a way, because it's like, I don't know, even like, cause like cis people, especially cis people, they have like such an interest in what trans bodies are in like a weird zoo way of like, oh my gosh, this person is a guy and has a pussy. What?
Like, oh my God, how do you have sex? You know, that's really it's a sexual question.
And it's like, it's not even like, for a lot of trans women, it's like very fetishistic question. For trans men, it's just like this weird zoo question where it's like, whoa, how does that work? The same way you're like talking to like some like scientist making something work, and it's like, it's just a pussy, babe. Like, it's just a pussy.
Well, it is, but it's also different. I feel like it's different. Like I'm with women and I'm like, you know, like cis women, and I'm like, oh, we actually are looking for such different ways of being and like touching this and interacting with this.
Oh yeah.
Because it's like, also your genitals are different a little bit, not in any extreme way. Like it's still very much clockable for what it is, but it's like there's a factor there that, and I think that's the intrigue, because it's like, how could someone who's on testosterone have a pussy that looks exactly like a cis woman? Some do. Some don't have any growth or anything. But it changes you. And people are so intrigued. I love it. Honestly, I find it kind of hilarious. I'm like, why is this so interesting to you? And why are you so...
Like, let's unpack it.
Yeah, I've unpacked it with too many cis men. Really, it's the cis women don't ask questions. I will say they're not doing that. They're like, they get that you have a pussy eventually. And then they're just like, oh, okay, we speak the same language in a sense. Men, cis men.
They don't know anything. Like, cis men don't know anything about pussies ever, like in any like realm of society. So, and then you just have that on, you just add another confusion to that. And they're just like, what? Hello?
We have sex with girls that a dick.
Like, babe, you don't need a you don't need a penis. Like,
oh man. I mean, you know, I get it. I mean, honestly, I think this like goes into, and this is not really the topic of this conversation, but it goes into like larger, like sex norms of like, why does it having a different genital throws such a wrench in the way that people think that they have sex. Because actually sex is like very little to do with like this part does this thing, and it's so much more fluid than that, right? Like some people want nipple play, other people are like, don't come near my chest, you know? Like everybody, it's not just about, or like me, like I can't get hickeys, you know, like I'm impossible to touch on the neck. It just doesn't work. I'm too, you know, jumpy. But so I think that's like everybody has things about their body that are different, and they like different things, and we pay so much attention to genitals because A, we're afraid of sex toys, and B, we like to have categories for things. It's ridiculous, especially when it comes to sex.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that draws this fascination in. But I'm like, fuck that. I'm naked whenever, however much it's appropriate.
Exactly. And I think like at least like the perception of like especially trans sex is like comes from like definitely just like porn, and like porn is just unrealistic in every sense, even with like straight people. Like that is not how it works. That has never happened to anyone in real life ever. But like yeah, there's so many different layers to it, and I guess because like at least like some people like it's not just about your genitals, I guess. Like it's never just about, because it's just like that's boring and it doesn't really do much. Like if you're just, especially like with, I would say with a vagina, it's like it's if you're just focused on that, like that's a very small area and it's not going to do much. Like
I feel like it's just for everybody in general. This fixation on genitals is the only place of sexual pleasure and like the driving force of how you have sex. This determines how you have sex. And it's like, I actually think it's really interesting to think about the parts of sex that we deem like not important. And I think that this is like, to me, this is where I think nudity is most important to talk about during sex. Is like, I had a mentor of mine who had done like a lot of sex education training, and I was having sexual problems in a relationship that I was in. And he was like, what if you guys like really get to know every part of each other's whole bodies? Like what if you like intentionally like want to look at and touch every inch of your partner's body? And how does that change like the way that you're relating to them and how comfortable you feel? And I think that itself captures this like trans nudism, like
yes,
movement almost. It's about finding comfort in all of your body. Because there's like, it's not like holding a mirror up to your pussy and saying, I love you. You know, that's not gonna work. It's like feeling like all of your body is yours, right? From the tips of your fingers to your pussy, to your back, to your legs, you know, like it's reclaiming all of that I don't know, cis society tells you is inherently wrong just because of what you have going on in your sex organs.
So you mentioned that like kind of the exploring of like your partner's bodies, it was kind of like similar to what trans nudism is at its core. And I think it'd be great to like sum it up as like unconditional love of the self, I guess. It's like you're fully loving every part of it, even in like ways you wouldn't originally acknowledge, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess to me, I like taking love out of it. It's not necessarily about love, but it's about visibility. To me, that's the essence of it, right? It's like the more something is invisible, the scarier it is, the more you attach to it, right? Because you're not actually interacting with it. It's like loving someone that you don't know that well, right? Like how you're attaching all this shit to them that has nothing to do with them. And I think that it's felt really transformative for me to just take love out of the equation, because I don't think that that's also, at least for me personal, it's not realistic. It's not that I don't experience dysphoria. It's just about finding like avenues that really acknowledge and like like take to heart how much I feel comfortable in my body, right? Because it's not always that I love it, but I know it. I've never had another body. So for 20 years, I've been getting to know this body, even though I've been trying not to. So it's just like about acknowledgement, you know, because like there's this denial, you know, there's like being trans is, I feel like for me, it's been so much in my head of like thinking about myself in a certain way, seeing myself a certain way. And that sometimes feels really detached from reality. And so that keeps you perpetually like putting a goal to achieve in the future. Like I'll look this way or I'll get closer to this ideal. And I think that like I just kind of try to like slow myself down and just find myself where I'm at now. Look in the mirror and like try to find stillness, because it's so much looking forward.
Yeah, and I think like the concept of like having like transness is so cerebral. It's like so in your head, and like the whole like it's like you're chasing like the platonic ideal. Like it almost makes you feel like you're just like it's this like platonic ideal that isn't realistic, because it's like an ideal, like it's the epitome. But the thing is, like I think like when I was like transitioning and like starting transitioning, I was like, these are like, I want all of these goals, I want all of this. And now that I've kind of like run out of things to do like with my body, like I'm on testosterone, I've had top surgery, I don't want bottom surgery. There's like I'm at the end basically, and it's just like I have no reason to want more. Like it's just like this is what I'm having, because this is my body now. After all this, testosterone's gonna change a little more stuff. I'm probably gonna get more hairier, like, but at the current moment, it's like this is what I have. So it's kind of like learning to be like the acceptance of it. And I think, like, at least for me, like whenever like I am sitting up by myself in my underwear, I do think it isn't about love. It's just about as trans people we're like kind of performing like we're in a cis heteronormative society. Like everything is very cis based, and so like having moments to yourself where you can just sit in your underwear or sit nude is really like indulgent. It's very like you're kind of shuttering everything outside like away from you for a moment, and it's like a nice like relaxation. I think like at least like kind of being like news or like clothesless in a way, just kind of like forsaking clothes in my own personal space. It's like helped me love a lot of the parts of the body that like a lot of trans people have problems with. And this is actually something I remembered and I wanted to ask your opinions on. Is I know some people who are wanting to start testosterone, but their main worry is about bottom growth and they don't want it. Have any opinions about it and how that relates to trans nudism? Because I think, like, at least for me, like, I can't imagine not wanting testosterone for no bottom growth, because that's the fun part.
Wow. Okay. I love this. We're coming from very different places. I would say that I felt similarly. I didn't want bottom growth. And I think initially I did because it's similar to you, when you first come out, it's a lot of like, okay, how do I get there? Like you see, like when Caitlyn Jenner came out, it was like she came out and she had all these surgeries, and all of a sudden it was like paradigm shift, and so you're looking for like a way to like mark this big difference, and like, pre-transition, and now I'm like, I've done it. And for me, that manifested in like I wasn't on testosterone for a while because it came out when I was young, and so I was on hormone blockers. And so I actually didn't hit puberty until I was like 17. But for me, that manifested very much in like planning surgeries, right? I was intent on having bottom surgery when I first came out. And that is like something that I would never do now. Like for the last like 3 years, something that I was like, I would never do that. like just because of how I relate to my own body and like the relationship that I've come to have, especially I think sexually with my genitals. I'm like, I don't want to try anything else. This is my thing. But the bottom growth, I really didn't want. I really don't. I mean, like, I guess I get it. I get why you would want it, and then I also get why you wouldn't want it, because it makes you more norm deviating. Like, at least, you know, if you don't have bottom growth, then your genitals are still digestible, separate from your body, in a sense. But I think that bottom growth is something that like is a real marker of like the journey that your body has been on. Mm-hmm. And I think that like it's unavoidable. And some people really don't get it. Most people get some. But now I wouldn't. Like now I guess I just feel so ready to go wherever the wind blows with my body. Like I've been thinking about carrying a child so much. Something that if you had asked me when I was 13, like I don't even know what I would have said. Like that was just unimaginable. But I'm really fascinated by my sexual organs. So I think that like I'm coming from a very weird place. And that I really get that.
Yeah, it's a weird like little gender fuck moment when it comes to like thinking about this, because it's so unusual with the bottom growth debate. Because the friend that I was having this debate, because I think he's on testosterone now, but it was a lot of like, it was something like several of us had to talk to him about, of like, oh, these are our experiences with testosterone and bottom growth. And it was very unusual because he was very like, it's not just a like, oh, I am thinking about transness and like a fear of like trans. It's like a weird, like it's pervasive through like people who are like trans men, and like a little more like internalized transphobia to those who are very like free and open. It spans the same like not want of it. And sometimes it's like aesthetic, sometimes it's like internalized stuff, but it's like it's all there, and it's really interesting, I think. I remember
there's one more piece that's really important that I haven't heard people talk about as much, is that for me a lot of it had to do with pleasure.
Oh,
the reason that I didn't want it.
That's interesting.
To me it's like the clit is so sensitive, and that doesn't really change when it gets bigger.
Yeah, no.
So it's kind of like, and that's why I think it's so important to talk about as being really distinct from like cis pussies. Totally different way of interacting with it.
Oh no, yeah, like, totally.
It's a totally different beast. And I guess to me, it's just as beautiful, and it was never about aesthetics. For me, it had to do a lot with like how it felt.
I can see that. It was very, I will say, like in the first like couple months of testosterone, when you're going through those changes, weird as shit.
So weird.
It like,
and then when you look down and you're like, wait, what? I don't know how to relate to this now.
It's even like, at least for me, I had an issue where like I'd be in my underwear and I'd just be so sensitive, and it was so annoying. Also, this is like so TMI, but like like with like testosterone, they say, oh, you're gonna get like this is gonna get really dry. Like that's like something that happens. No, did not happen.
Didn't happen for me either.
It's super soaker moment. It was like, Jesus Christ. Like it's like it's such a weird feeling, and I think I really, it's a weird like what the thought process of like not wanting bottom growth is like different for each person, but it all kind of like, it's a weird unifying thing. I think I never thought about bottom growth a lot when I was like when I was a little baby trans. I never thought about it, and I didn't really think about it until I started my like testosterone process, which was like senior year, or like December of like 2019. So I was like 17, almost 18. But I remember when you're talking about like bottom surgery, I remember for a while I wanted bottom surgery. And now I wouldn't. No way in hell. For several years, no way in hell. Because one, I have like, I guess it's like an intrusive thought or fear of like the whole skin graft process. Like it just feeds into something too morbid that I don't want to touch. And two, it looks so painful. I don't want to lose feeling in like another part of my body for it. And it seems like too much of a pain in the ass. Like I had complications with my top surgery. I
don't know one person that's gotten bottom surgery and hasn't had years of complications. Years.
Yeah, it's just like
it's nightmare complications.
It's literally like I had like my complication with top surgeries. I had like a hematoma, and that was hell. I don't want to know what's going to happen in there. I find it's actually really fascinating you're talking about like the whole like carrying a child as like a trans person, because it's so, I've been thinking about it a bit too, but in the sense of like I find it really fascinating, and the things that are making me kind of against it aren't because I'm trans. It's because of like family medical history, because my mom was pre-eclamptic when she had me, and
wow,
I don't want to have preeclampsia.
Yeah, that's so many things. And also passing on my genes.
Yeah.
I'm like really somewhat like, but I don't know, from another perspective, I think like, cause I remember, you know, like when I was young and there were these stories of these pregnant trans men, I was like shocked, not appalled, but like shocked, and like never wanted that to be me. I was always, when I was having sex with men, irrationally concerned that they were gonna get me pregnant. I'd never gotten my period, but I was irrationally concerned that somehow they were gonna get me pregnant and I wouldn't know, and I would wake up and I'd be like 6 months pregnant, you know?
Oh my God. You go into the hospital for like a tummy ache, and then you're pregnant and you're having the baby right now.
That was my fear. And now I'm kind of like, I'm really like, since I started spending so much time naked and thinking about my body, and really this has become like the central focus of everything that I am thinking about and doing, especially artistically. I just can't imagine like another niche that feels more like this is my calling, because like as an artist, like this is like what I want to be thinking about and like working on, and just like I've really started to be fascinated with what my body can do that nobody else's body can do.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like it's almost like in a way, it's like almost like athletic Olympics. Like I can do all of this stuff, and like the Olympian, like ideal Promethean body, and you're just like, yeah, I'm my own version of that. Exactly.
And I think that like I'd never really seen anyone relate to transness in a way that, like in that way. I'd seen people relate to it in that way, but to me it never like struck. It never like it never landed. And it was always, I was like, it's too floofy for me, you know, like this self-love thing. I think that for me was like never an avenue that would have worked. And I think it was much more of a like, it's kind of like a, what are your perversions? What are your interests? What are your bodily fixations? Like what is, because I think that a lot of cis people have them too. And to them, it's like, it's a little bit less close to the surface. They can't really grab it. And I feel like it's right there and I can grab it and I just want to do something weird, you know, like, and I kind of really like, I really let myself, and there are things now that I do love about it, right? Like I do love what not having a dick does to sexual dynamics.
Yeah, taking him out of the question.
Yeah, I love holding space I don't know. Like recently, I feel much less comfortable calling myself like as a trans man. That feels like something is missing. But as a trans guy, I'd say like it's something that I've really come to like almost fuck with. Like to exist outside of dick-centric sex is a privilege, and as a man too, it's like it's really interesting the position you hold and the relationships that like you have.
Yeah, I think I really agree with that, and I think it's like, oh man, I just lost the words, but it's like very like, I think like the whole, I definitely agree about like the trans man not even being like an apt title. Like I don't have like any words, so I don't use like non-binary or whatever. I just call myself trans mask, and I'm like, that's close enough. Close enough. But I find it really fascinating. It's like this sort of like indulgence of trans bodies, especially in like partnership with another person and not just in isolation, is so fascinating. And even when dick is in the equation, it's not like cis guy dick. It's like girl dick, which is different. Like, and it's like, I think like trans nudism is kind of like almost like, it's a rather T for T concept, because it's like if you're being so like have full acceptance of your own body and then are going with someone else and having this same relationship with their bodies, it's like a very trans way of loving and care, of like of being with someone.
I think you almost said of caring. Is that what you almost said? Of caring. Oh God, I love that.
Of caring and being with someone, and it's just like, because like it's care.
Well, care. I'm sorry, like, and I'm speaking mostly from the experience of like, I have only had sex with cis men and cis women, and it's terrible. Like, it's not terrible, but I wish that I could speak more to like what I think you're getting at, which sounds really like radical. Like, I don't know, but the sense of care that comes, I think that people, like what I've noticed is like the way that cis women, especially, like the conversations that we're having around sex and how much more willing they are to talk about penetration in a way that like, it's not the end all be all. It's a part of, like, it can be a part of it. But I think that like, that's distinct. That's really distinct. And that's a kind of care that like, I think that it would have never occurred to me or to give or to think about. And I don't think that people would be seeking it from me. I think that like, it's just this sort of like and this gets back to like why that waxer, nobody thought about trans men when that waxer was talking about how trans pussies are so weird. And it's like, we live in a world that is so dick focused. Yeah, like you are being shoved, dick is shoved down your throat, like not in a fun way. Dick is shoved down your throat from every direction. And it's like, to be able to take a step back from that, especially as like someone who is so often like perceived as a cis man, it's like a really interesting experience. And I think that has really shifted my relationship with trans nudism.
Definitely. I think like I've been with like cis men, I've been with like good cis men, but also some like, okay, I don't know what you're doing, but this isn't hot. But it's like such a different experience, I think. Like even not like being just intimate with, in a non-sexual way with like a trans person, almost feels like so much more like heightened than with like a cis person. It's like kind of wild of like nothing's happening the same way that like a cis with a cis person, it's like there's no like usual like da 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 da. It's just like even just being like in like a flirtatious, intimate space with a trans person, where like it's the suggestion of things. It's so much more intimate and close and personal, and I think it's because of that, like this similar like because transgenderism is so personal, it's so individual, because it's like all happening to yourself, and when it's happening as a collective feeling between two people, it's so like weird. It's like having two little magnets, like it's almost polarized, but when you get them together they have like a weird rub, and it's really tense. It's like feels like that, like, but it's like a feeling, and it's really insane, at least to me. I think like, yeah, it's like this level of care that goes into it is really fascinating. And I think it's just the like kind of self-love as like a trans body, because like whenever it's conversations about like trans bodies, it's all just as like in a very sterile medical way almost, where it's like, oh yeah, these are like, this is all of the different things it causes by this and this, da, 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 da. And as trans people like that have gone to doctors and have had this explained to them, that's how like we have the verbiage to like connect with it. It's just like, oh yeah, these are, but as like a culture almost, like in a community, it's really fascinating how it's changed. And I was wondering, you mentioned that you want to make trans nudism a part of your art and your like focus of your art. In what ways? Because I know like there's a lot of like performance artists, like art performance artists that like do radical nude performance art. But I know you're an experimental filmmaker, and I was wondering, what do you see trans nudism playing in your art, and if you have any like upcoming projects and stuff, or ideas or whatever?
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, I'm really fascinated by this invisibility and like hyper visibility, like binary. I guess it's not binary, but I guess deconstructing that binary of like, I want to take control over the way that like trans masculine bodies are being represented. Because I mean, come on, what have you seen? Like really I gave a presentation in my class of my experimental film, and the way that I started was like, how many of you have ever seen a trans man represented nude before? How many of you have ever seen a nude trans masculine body? And I think like 4 people in their class raised their hand. The professor, the other trans people in the class, and then 1 person that like happened to go to the same high school as me. And so I know that like the exposure is really different, like the artistic exposure. And I think that there's something about the invisible that's terrifying and erotic and fascinating. And I kind of like that. I like that those things are there to be deconstructed and like put back together, because it's always exciting and fascinating to see a naked body. But why is it terrifying? And why is it repulsive? It's also repulsive. I didn't say that, but I think that there's a lot of like
implication. Yeah.
And so I think that those are all things that I'm really interested in exploring in a very bodily way, in a non-linear way. I just don't think that I don't think that a plot line could ever capture the emotional journey of like disclosure or of grappling with like what existing in your body means, and like how nudism can feel radical. I think that's like a place for experimental or non-narrative art. And I think I'm exploring it in other things too. I'm writing a lot of poetry, and this continues to be like what I'm interrogating. This like And it's really not made to be palatable for cis people. It's not made for cis people. It's not made with cis people in mind. And so I think that like cis people kind of don't know what to do with it.
That's the point.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, oh God. And maybe, I think actually this is a wonderful point to bring up, is that a few years ago, my mom and dad and sister were at a big art show in New York. And there was, one of the installations was from this trans artist. I don't know his name, but he had taken a series, like a photo shoot of him naked, I think documented in somehow in relation to public space. And he was very like, I think he was flexing. It was like a assertion of power. And my mom walked out. My mom started crying and walked out, and she was like, it felt so vulnerable and intimate, and like just putting yourself out there like that. And to me, you know, I'm on the other end of the line, and I'm like, like wow, like you really couldn't get past the nudity of it, huh? Like, what did you think about the project? Like, people get so caught up on the nudity that they don't see into the purpose of it. And I want to fuck with that. And I like making it inaccessible, because she didn't need access to his purpose. She didn't need, it went so far over her head. And not in a, and we've talked about this since, you know, and she knows how I feel, but it's just like, there's something about and it goes back to this bravery thing. Like, oh, you're so brave. Actually, why is it so brave? Like,
you're just existing.
I just this is what my body looks like. And I'm sorry that it makes you uncomfortable. But this is what my body looks like. And there's a shit ton of people who look just like me and feel like everybody around them is telling them that their body looks weird, because that's what she's telling me indirectly.
Yeah.
That's what all of these messages are telling me. That's what Boys Don't Cry is telling you, that if someone you love looks at your genitals, it will be your biggest nightmare. Yes. It is your biggest nightmare. And it was my biggest nightmare. This is why I let nobody that I was dating see me naked. And then there was this break where I was like, I am taking on other people's hatred of my body in a way that is so damaging. It hurts so much. It makes it so hard to exist in this body.
Yes.
And that is something that I think I just really want to be sitting with. And oh, we lost you.
Do you have any closing points? Want to?
No, thanks for having me.
This was great.
Yeah, I'm always thinking about this. I feel like I just want to say that I feel like we talk about things that people don't talk about verbally almost ever. I don't remember the last time I actually talked about bottom growth, verbally.
No, verbally.
I only ever saw it on Tumblr or on those weird blogs. So it felt really special, because nobody's watching us right now, but people will listen to this and hear things that they haven't heard, in the same way that I like to make people see things that they haven't seen. And so that feels like we approach trans nudism verbally, almost like we got naked, kind of.
Yeah, it's weird in the this is gonna be a purely audio thing. Everybody's just listening to us. For all they know, we could be naked right now, and we're just on Zoom naked. But it's more of the declothing of the self, not in a literal way, but in a more metaphorical. And I think it's this was really wonderful. I never really talked about like trans nudism in like this deep of a conversation about like trans bodies with someone, and it's really, really interesting. And that's like, it was like, it's reminding me like, this is why I signed up to do this radio show. Because it's just like fun to have these like conversations that it's just between trans people. There's something like that we know something, we're talking about something we just never talked with anybody else about, but to cis people, they're like, what the fuck is this?
How they can just randomly land on it. It's like, oh. But yeah, it was a blast. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, no problem. It was my pleasure. Thank you for agreeing to be here. I'm really happy to have met you. Like, this is so cool. Do you have a website at all I can link for your art?
I am working on I am not releasing any of my stuff until I've submitted it.
Okay.
So no. If someone wants to see it, they can reach out to me and I can show it to them. If they're trans,
Okay.
if they're cis, don't hit me up. I'm not going to send it to you. But if you're trans, I'll send it to you.
I'll be linking in the Instagram. I'm gonna be tagging you so people can go hit you up. This is really great. If you have any, like, if you do any art shows at all that are like trans, or just do art shows in general, like around UCLA or LA area, like, let me know and I'm gonna broadcast it out, because I definitely want to see more of your work. And like, I haven't even seen your film and I really want to see it.
I'll share it with you right now, actually. You can send me, after this, send me your email and I'll share it with you. And it's a rough cut. I haven't made a final cut, but
Yes, I am so excited. All right, thank you for listening to T-Boy Swag. We're on every other Monday at noon. For spring quarter, we're going to be going weekly. But yeah, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation about trans nudism, and I hope you have some fun nudist times in light of this. All right, bye-bye.
On to the psychiatrist, giving you a lecture shock. They say that let you live at home with mom and dad instead of mental hospitals. But every time you tried to read a book, you couldn't get to page 17, 'cause you forgot where you were, so you couldn't even read. Don't you know they're gonna kill your sons? Don't you know they're gonna kill your sons? They're gonna kill your sons until they run away. Mom informed me on the phone, she didn't know what to do about that. He took an axe and broke the table. Aren't you glad you're married? And his sister, she got married on the island, and her husband takes the train. He's big and he's fat, and he doesn't even have a brain. They're gonna kill your son. Don't you know they're gonna kill your sons? Don't you know they're gonna kill your sons until they run away. Creed more cheaply, very good, but pain with it was even better. And when I flipped out on PHC, I was so sad I didn't even get a letter. All of the drugs that we took, it really was lots of fun. But when they shoot you up with Thorazine or crystal smoke, you choke like a son of a gun. Don't you know they're gonna kill your son?